Hello YouTubers. On this channel, I've repeatedly stated that tensions with China will continue to increase and that war with China will happen. I've stated this since the trade war started and my view hasn't changed one bit. This video is not about why we should go to war with China though. Rather, it's about how we have been led into the wrong wars. In so doing, you'll see why I'm highly despised. You'll also see that I care far more about the truth than of anyone hating me. While I think we should avoid war as much as possible, we should not avoid war at any cost. The Bible does not teach pacifism. Rather, the Bible teaches that there is a time and season for everything, that there is a time for war and a time for peace. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that, in some cases, refusing to go to war is sinful. We used to understand this far better because we once had humility. While humility is a virtue in all areas of life, it's particularly important in deciding when to go to war. Don't listen to politicians or preachers that tell you that we were once a moral nation, blessed by God, until we became the greatest nation on earth. While it's certainly true that God blessed our nation and that we became the greatest nation on earth, there has never been a moral nation. Considering the atrocities committed to the Native Americans and how racist we were, we might have even been the most immoral of nations. So why did God allow us to prosper? God blessed us because, being primarily Calvinist, we had at least enough humility to recognize our own immorality. It's far different from today, where many have become secular, while those who identify as Christian are often filled with self-righteousness and false teachings. We've become prideful, greedy, and corrupt because we have turned from God. And because we don't understand His Word, we no longer know when we should go to war and when we should be at peace. Let me put it this way. If many Christians are so easily taken in by a false doctrine that teaches Christ will rapture His church before the tribulation, how can they be expected to know what the Bible teaches about war? Don't mistake what I'm saying. I imagine that anyone, Christian or not, has at least one silly-headed view. Quite obviously, a person doesn't need to understand everything in the Bible to understand what it teaches about war. And in fact, there's even a few true Christians that are dispensationalists. A good example would be my uncle that passed away a few years ago. Even though he was dispensationalist, you could tell beyond any shadow of a doubt that his heart was filled with love for God and love for others. If there was ever a man that Christ would resurrect from the dead, it would be him. I suspect that true Christians who are dispensationalists are so because it's been ingrained into their head from a very young age, yet they rightfully understand that loving others is far more important than whether or not you believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. I'm not trying to be harsh against dispensationalists, but I realize most of them are dispensational because their parents raised them to be and have never questioned the doctrine enough to find out on their own. I don't even want to be harsh against people that read arguments for dispensationalism and agree, although a lot of times I'm harsh with people like that. I get angry because they typically look for ways to justify dispensationalism rather than to discover what the Bible actually teaches. Then, when I cool down, I figure that if a person is so foolish as to accept such silly arguments to justify their views, then they are probably foolish enough to think that my anger is because the devil is trying to lead them astray. I know that it seems like I've veered off topic about going to war, but I haven't. You'll see how it relates in just a minute. In all my life, I don't think I've persuaded a single person against dispensationalism, or anything else for that matter. For example, I have a cousin that started watching YouTube videos and became persuaded that the Earth is flat. Heck, I have a Master of Science in GIS, and while no one should need a master's to understand that the Earth is round, the fact that people watch YouTube videos made by complete morons and become persuaded by them is, to me, perhaps the most troubling aspect of our society. It's made me question what many view as the most important of our constitutional rights, namely the right to free speech. Come to the conclusion that lies or disinformation should not count as free speech. A person should be free to speak anything truthful or even an honestly held religious belief, no matter how wrong they may be. However, people should not have the right to lie to the American public. Lie to your friends and family if you want, but the media and idiots on social media are creating a society filled with morons. It is these propaganda artists and idiots that, far and away, pose the greatest danger to our national security. And good grief, we've got enough problems from people with foolish religious doctrines. For example, why would you suppose that America does pretty much anything Israel wants? It's because, starting in the late 1800s, false preachers started convincing the American people of dispensationalism. Think of how many wars and conflicts that an idiotic view like dispensationalism has brought us. These fools think they are serving God because of a verse in the Old Testament that says God will bless those who bless Abraham and curse those who curse Abraham. Somehow they think that God was talking about the nation of Israel. They then use that verse to try and make sense of the rest of the Old Testament. In so doing, these idiots have twisted pretty much every book in the Bible. Should America be enemies with Iran because of false and idiotic views about the Bible? Should America have to endure terrorist attacks and spend trillions of dollars on a pointless and endless war on terror because of Israel? I ask, since we started doing everything Israel wanted, how has God blessed us? If these fools think that God has blessed us because we have blessed Israel, then please tell me, how has God blessed us? Our terrible roads, terrible education, incredibly high income inequality, people dying from a lack of health care, severe drug addiction, and a significant increase in immorality, blessings from God? There hasn't been a stronger supporter of Israel than the current administration, and yet God allowed China to send us a terrible pandemic which entirely halted our economy and put millions of people out of a job. It killed over 200,000 Americans so far, and even infected the president and his wife. Why would God allow such a terrible pandemic to happen to a nation that's done far more for Israel than any other nation? Well, the reason is quite simple. It only requires basic reading comprehension skills. Genesis is not talking about blessing people that bless Israel. In fact, he said nothing about Israel other than he would turn Abraham's descendants into a nation. By reading without any preconceived ideas, it's quite plain that God is making a specific promise to Abraham, that God would bless those who bless Abraham and curse those who curse Abraham. And then, through Abraham's seed, which is Jesus Christ, God promised to bless all nations. See, God once blessed our nation because we loved God and His Son. And likewise, God has cursed us because we chose to help reestablish and fervently support a religion and nation that God desolated. Rather than to follow Christ, we followed after the Christ killers. We followed after those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. For those that would call me an anti-Semite, I'll outright state that I don't care what you call me. If it's racist to hate the Jewish religion, then that's exactly what I am. If, however, racism is actually about hating people because of their race, then there's nothing racist about me. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm pro-Christianity and pro-American. But let's be clear about one thing. The true children of Abraham are those who accept Christ, whether Jew or Gentile. Any Christian that says that the Jewish race are the children of Abraham have become like the foolish Galatians. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you, that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ has been evidently set forth, crucified among you? Know ye therefore that they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. As I said before, we have lost sight of God, but not through secularism. We have lost sight of God through a false form of Christianity. Why would I say that? While I in no way approve of secularism, it is not the secularists that have led us into the wrong wars. It is not the secularists that have destroyed our country. Most importantly, the reason for the rise in secularism is that false Christians have turned people away from God. Because we have lost sight of God, we no longer know when to go to war and when to be at peace. While many may blame imperialism, the problem isn't imperialism. The problem is that we've been led into the wrong wars. We've allowed Israel to tell us who to go to war with rather than the Word of God. That's all the time I have for now. If you like this video, please show your support by subscribing. Thanks for your time.